My father was not a man of soft words. He never said, "I love you." He never hugged me for long. And he never explained himself. For most of my life, I thought that meant he did not care. When other children talked about bedtime stories and gentle fathers, I stayed quiet. My father showed love in a different language, one I did not understand back then, a language made of rules, early mornings, and long silences. I remember once asking him, "Why are you always so strict?" He looked at me for a moment, then turned away and said nothing. That silence stayed with me for years. Growing up, I mistook his discipline for distance. His quiet presence felt heavy. His expectations felt like walls I could never climb. I told myself that love should feel warm. It should feel easy. It should sound kind. And because his love did not sound like that, I believed it was missing. It was only later, much later, that I began to notice the small things. The way he waited outside my school every day, no matter the weather. The way he worked late nights and woke up early without complaint. The way he fixed things quietly so I would never feel unsafe. But at the time, I did not see those things as love. I saw them as duty, as control, as distance. This story is not about a perfect father. It is about a quiet one, a man who rarely spoke of love, but lived it every single day. And this is the story of how I understood him only after it almost became too late. We lived in a small house where everything had its place. My father believed order kept life from falling apart. Shoes lined up by the door, lights off when not needed. Mornings started early, always. My mother was softer. She spoke gently and laughed easily. When I fell or failed, she held me close. When I succeeded, she celebrated. My father watched from a distance. Not cold, just quiet. He worked long hours, came home tired, ate his food in silence, then fixed whatever was broken in the house before sitting down. When I brought home my report cards, my mother smiled. My father studied the paper carefully. If the grades were good, he nodded once. If they were not, he simply said, "You can do better." I wanted praise. I wanted excitement. I wanted him to tell me he was proud. Instead, he taught me how to ride a bike by letting go without warning. He taught me how to tie my shoes by making me try again and again. He taught me how to stand up straight, speak clearly, and finish what I started. At night, I sometimes heard him talking quietly with my mother, worrying about money, planning for my future, making sure I would have choices he never did. But he never told me those things. To me, he was the man who said no more than yes, the man who expected more than I thought I could give, the man who believed love did not need to be explained. I grew up believing that love should be loud, that it should comfort you when you fail, that it should tell you again and again that you matter. I did not realize then that some people love by building strength, not softness, by preparing you for the world, not protecting you from it. And so as I grew older, a quiet distance formed between us, not from anger, but from misunderstanding, a distance that would take years and a painful truth to finally close. As I grew older, the distance between my father and me did not shrink. It stretched quietly, year by year, like a road neither of us knew how to cross. In school, I started to notice other parents more. Fathers who clapped loudly at events, who hugged their children in public, who said words like, "I'm proud of you," without hesitation. My father never came inside the school. He waited outside the gate, always on time, always watching from a distance. When I asked him once why he never attended parent meetings, he said, "You know what you need to do. That is enough." To him, it was practical. To me, it felt like disinterest. I stopped asking questions. I stopped sharing small stories from my day. If he did not ask, I assumed he did not care. At home, our conversations became short and functional. Did you eat? Finish your homework. Wake up early tomorrow. No warmth, no curiosity, no space for feelings. I remember one evening clearly. I had failed an important exam. Not badly, but enough to hurt my confidence. My mother noticed immediately. She sat beside me and asked gently, "What happened?" I told her everything. She listened. She comforted me. My father heard from the other room. He called me later and said only one sentence. "You were careless. Do better next time." That night, I cried silently into my pillow. Not because of the exam, but because I felt unseen. I told myself I would never be like him, never cold, never distant, never silent when someone needed comfort. As a teenager, I began to push back. Not loudly, just quietly. I spent more time outside, stayed in my room longer, answered him with short replies the same way he spoke to me. If he noticed, he did not show it. When I chose my subjects in college, he insisted on practical ones. Something stable, something safe. I wanted something different, something creative, something that felt like mine. We argued for the first time then, not shouting, just tension. He said, "Dreams don't pay bills." I said, "Not everything is about money." He looked at me for a long moment, then said, "You'll understand one day." I hated that sentence. It felt like a wall, a way to end every discussion, a way to avoid explaining himself. I chose my path anyway, not to hurt him, but to prove something to myself. During those years, we barely spoke beyond necessity. My mother often tried to bridge the gap. "He worries about you," she would say. "He just doesn't know how to say it." I did not believe her. If he worried, why didn't he ask? If he cared, why didn't he show it? When I moved out for work, he helped quietly, paid the deposit, carried boxes, checked the locks twice. He did not say goodbye properly, just nodded and said, "Call if you need anything." I didn't call much. Life became busy. Work, friends, responsibilities. Sometimes weeks passed without us speaking, sometimes months. When we did talk, it felt awkward, like two people who shared history but no present. I heard from relatives that he spoke about me often, that he defended my choices, that he worried when I was sick. But never to me. I built my own life, my own rules, my own way of loving. Yet something inside me remained unsettled. Whenever I failed, I wondered what he would say. Whenever I succeeded, I wished secretly that he would notice. But the words never came. Then came the moment that shifted everything. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was just heavy. My mother fell ill. Suddenly, the quiet house felt too empty, too fragile. I returned home more often. Not for him, for her. I saw my father differently then. Older, slower, still silent. He slept on a chair beside her bed in the hospital. Barely ate, barely rested. He handled doctors, medicines, paperwork, never complained, never broke down. One night I overheard him praying softly, asking for her pain, not his own. I stood outside the door, frozen. For the first time, I saw emotion in his silence, but still, he did not speak to me about it. After my mother passed away, the house became unbearably quiet. The silence I once blamed him for now filled every corner. We sat together after the funeral, two people grieving in different ways. I wanted to talk, to ask him everything I never asked before, but he just said, "Eat something." Old habits, old distance, days passed, weeks. One evening, while cleaning, I found a small box hidden in his cupboard. Inside were things I had forgotten. My childhood drawings, school certificates, a broken watch I once loved, and letters. Letters he had never given me. Letters he wrote but never sent. That was when the silence finally began to speak, and everything I thought I knew about my father started to change. I sat on the floor with that small box in front of me for a long time. The house was quiet in the way only grief can make it quiet. No voices, no footsteps, just the sound of my own breathing. The letters were old, some yellowed at the edges, some folded again and again, as if they had been opened many times and then carefully hidden. I picked one up. My name was written on the front in my father's handwriting. Careful, firm. The same way he wrote grocery lists and bills. My hands shook as I opened it. The letter began simply, "I don't know how to say this to you out loud." I stopped reading for a moment. Those words alone felt heavier than anything he had ever said to me. I kept going. He wrote about the day I was born, about holding me and feeling afraid for the first time in his life. Not afraid of losing me, afraid of failing me. He wrote that his own father had been harsh, unforgiving, silent in a way that left scars. "I promised myself I would not break you," he wrote, "but I also did not know how to be gentle, I felt something crack inside me. I read another letter, and another. One was written after I failed that exam years ago. "I wanted to tell you that one failure does not define you," he wrote, "but I was scared that comfort would make you careless." Another letter spoke about my career choice. "I argued because I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid you would struggle the way I did. Afraid I would not be able to protect you." He wrote about sitting outside my school every day, about working extra hours quietly so I would never know how tight money was, about defending me when relatives questioned my choices. "I did not say these things because I did not know how," one letter said. "I thought love was shown by doing, not speaking." Tears blurred the words. All those years I had thought his silence meant distance, but these letters told a different story. His silence was fear. Fear of saying the wrong thing. Fear of being weak. Fear of failing at love. I stayed there until my legs went numb. Reading, crying, remembering. Every memory I had replayed for years shifted slightly. Not erased, but reshaped. I thought about the night he let go of my bicycle without warning. I had fallen and scraped my knee. I remembered how angry I felt, but now I remembered something else. How he stood there, tense, watching closely, ready to catch me if I didn't get up. I remembered the night I failed that exam. How he sat awake long after everyone slept. How the light under his door stayed on. I had seen his actions, but I never understood their language. That night I did not sleep. In the morning, I found him in the kitchen, making tea, the same way he always had. For a moment, I almost walked away, old habits pulling me back into silence, but I couldn't anymore. I held the letters in my hand. "I found these," I said. He froze. Slowly he turned around. His face changed in a way I had never seen before. Not anger, not surprise, fear. "I didn't mean for you to read them," he said quietly. "They were meant for me," I replied. He sat down heavily, suddenly older, suddenly smaller. "I didn't know how to say those things to you," he said after a long pause. "My words, they never come out right." I sat across from him. "I spent my whole life thinking you didn't care," I said. My voice did not shake, but my heart did. He closed his eyes. "I cared too much," he whispered. "I just didn't know how to show it without breaking you." There was a long silence, but this one felt different. It wasn't empty, it wasn't sharp, it was full. I told him how his silence made me feel, how invisible I felt, how much I needed his words. He listened, really listened. "I thought if I spoke too much," he said, "you would depend on me. I wanted you to be strong." "I needed both," I replied. "Strength and softness." He nodded slowly. "I see that now," he said. That conversation did not fix everything. Years of misunderstanding do not disappear in one morning. But something shifted. The walls between us did not fall all at once, but cracks appeared. Over the next weeks, we spoke more, awkwardly, carefully. Sometimes he tried to say things and stopped halfway. Sometimes he said the wrong thing, but he tried. Once when I was leaving, he said quietly, "Drive safely." Then, after a pause, "I worry about you." It was a small sentence, but it felt like a bridge. I began to see him not as the father I wanted, but as the man he was. A man shaped by his own fears, his own past, his own limits. And I began to forgive him. Not because he was perfect, but because he loved in the only way he knew how. One evening, I found him holding one of my childhood drawings, the paper worn thin from years of folding. "I kept everything," he said, almost embarrassed. I didn't know why. I just couldn't throw them away. I smiled through tears. For the first time, I felt something I had been waiting for my whole life. Not words, understanding. And in that understanding, the silence finally began to lose its power. After that morning in the kitchen, nothing felt the same. Not because everything was suddenly perfect, but because the silence between us had changed its meaning. Before, silence felt like rejection. Now, it felt like space. A space we were slowly learning how to fill. My father did not turn into a man of many words overnight. He did not suddenly say, "I love you," every day. That was never going to be who he was. But small things began to change. He started asking simple questions. "Did you eat? How was work today?" Questions he had always asked, but now he waited for the answer. At first, I didn't know how to respond. Years of distance had taught me to keep my replies short, safe. But slowly, I began to tell him more. Not everything, just enough. I told him about my worries at work, about the pressure, about the fear of failing. He listened without interrupting, without advice, just listening. One evening, after I finished speaking, he said something that surprised me. "You don't have to carry everything alone." The words were simple. Must have been for him to say even that much. How many thoughts he had probably swallowed over the years. Living together after my mother's passing was not easy. Grief hung in the house like thick air. Sometimes we sat in the same room without speaking for hours, but now the silence felt shared, not isolating. I noticed how he moved more slowly, how his hands shook slightly when he poured tea, how age had finally caught up with him. For the first time, I saw him as someone who needed care too. I began cooking more often. He never asked, but he noticed. One night, after dinner, he said, "The food tastes better when you're here." It was his way of saying thank you. I understood that now. There were moments when old habits returned, times when he would shut down during difficult conversations, times when I felt that familiar frustration rise inside me, but instead of retreating, I spoke. "I need you to hear me," I would say gently, and most of the time he tried. Sometimes he failed, sometimes I did. Healing is not clean, it is uneven, slow. We talked about my childhood more than I ever thought we would. He told me stories about his own father, a man who believed softness made boys weak, a man who punished mistakes with silence that felt like abandonment. "I thought I was doing better," he said once. "I didn't hit you, I didn't shout." "You did better," I replied, "but you were still afraid." He nodded. "I was scared of becoming him," he admitted, "so scared that I didn't see how distant I became." That honesty changed something inside me. I stopped expecting him to be someone else. I stopped measuring his love against an image I had built in my head. Instead, I began to recognize his language. Love was him fixing the leaking roof without telling me. Love was him waking up early to make sure the house was warm. Love was him waiting quietly when I came home late. One afternoon, I found him trying to cook. The kitchen smelled wrong. The food was clearly burnt. I laughed. He looked embarrassed. "Your mother used to do this," he said quietly. I thought I should learn. My chest tightened. "You don't have to," I said. "I want to," he replied. That moment mattered more than any speech. Weeks turned into months. We fell into a new rhythm. Still quiet, but connected. Sometimes we watched television together without really watching. Sometimes we sat on the porch in the evenings, listening to the world slow down. One night, out of nowhere, he said, "I was proud of you. When you chose your own path, I froze." "You were?" I asked. He nodded. "I just didn't want you to think it was easy." I smiled sadly. "I thought you were disappointed." He shook his head. "No," he said. "I was afraid you would struggle and blame me for letting you." That sentence stayed with me. How many misunderstandings are built from fear? How many distances are created by love that doesn't know how to speak? As time passed, I noticed something else. I was changing too. I was softer with myself, less angry about the past, more forgiving of my own expectations. I stopped replaying old moments with resentment. Instead, I saw them with context. The day he waited outside my school gate, he was protecting me. The night he criticized my exam, he was afraid comfort would weaken me. The arguments about my career, he was scared of the world hurting me. Not perfect choices, but human ones. There was one evening that stands out clearly. We were sitting quietly after dinner. The house was dim, the kind of quiet that feels gentle. He looked at me and said slowly, "I didn't say it enough." I waited. "I didn't say that I loved you." He continued. "I thought you knew." My throat tightened. "I didn't." I admitted. Not always. He nodded. I'm sorry, he said. That was it. 2 words, no excuses, no explanations, just truth. I felt something release inside me. I know now, I said softly. And I forgive you. We sat there for a long time after that, not speaking, not needing to. In the months that followed, his health began to decline, quietly, gradually. Doctor visits, medicines, rest. This time, I stayed close. Not out of duty, out of choice. I helped him the way he had helped me all those years, without announcing it, without expecting praise. One night, as I tucked a blanket around his shoulders, he held my hand. You turned out strong, he said, stronger than I knew. I smiled through tears. And kinder, I replied, because you taught me how. He squeezed my hand gently. That was love, spoken without needing many words. And in that quiet exchange, I finally understood something important. Love does not always look the way we expect it to. Sometimes it hides behind fear, behind habits, behind silence. But when we choose to listen, truly listen, even silence begins to speak. That was our resolution. Not perfect, not dramatic, just 2 people learning late in life how to understand each other. And it was enough. Today, when I think of my father, I no longer feel the old ache in my chest. I feel a quiet warmth instead. He is still a man of few words. He still believes actions matter more than speeches. But now, I understand the language he has always been speaking. I think about the years I spent wishing he would change, wishing he would love me in a way I could recognize. And I realize how often we miss love because it does not arrive the way we expect. My father never learned how to say the right things, but he never stopped doing them. And that truth has softened every hard memory I once carried. If I could speak to my younger self, I would tell them this: do not measure love by volume. Do not assume silence means absence. Sometimes it means someone is afraid of saying the wrong thing. But I would also say this: love needs understanding from both sides. Strength does not have to exclude softness. Protection should not replace connection. I am grateful we found our way back to each other, even if it took years, even if it came through grief. Not everyone gets that chance. So if you are listening and there is someone in your life who loves quietly, look closer, listen deeper. And if you are the one who loves in silence, remember that the people you care about may need to hear it too. Love is strongest when it is both shown and spoken. That is the lesson my father taught me, not with words, but with a lifetime of actions.